Welcome in. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, I want to talk about an important question and an important topic for New York Jets fans, and that's, do you want Aaron Rodgers to return this season? I want to talk about the pros and the cons, but I want you to let me know in the comments section your reasoning for either wanting him to return this year or not wanting him to return this year. But let's hop into Ian Rappaport's comments about Aaron Rodgers returning this season.
Rich, the improbable is coming closer and closer to becoming reality. There's a chance that Aaron Rodgers, still trying to recover from that torn Achilles, used the speed bridge, tried to accelerate this recovery. There's a chance that he practices this week. That has been his hope. Jets coaches were unclear if it's actually going to happen. I would say more likely the next week, but his return to practice at least is coming. As one source said, he just needs to bring us the doctor's note. In other words, he needs to show that he is not doing damage to himself by being out there. And if he can protect himself, then he will practice and potentially will play. My understanding, Rich, is that he is targeting the December 24th game against the Washington Commanders to come back. That would give Aaron Rodgers 3 games to come in and play for the Jets. Their playoff hopes are dire. They are fading, but Rodgers still wants to come back somehow.
So based on that report, it seems like Rodgers is adamant about coming back, whether we are in contention or not. Remember, we were hearing reports just a few weeks ago that Rodgers, why would it make any sense for him to come back in a lost season? You don't want to have to risk it at that point. I think there's more going on to this whole Rodgers starting versus not starting towards the end of this year than I think we've been led to believe. And I saw this article by Peter King. I want to bring this up here. Rodgers turns 40 on Saturday. He knows the clock is ticking on his football life. Most people would think it's nonsensical to return to football without a longer time to rehab the injury. And it may be nonsensical in the grand scheme of things. Rodgers is famously his own person on most things. I think it's highly unlikely he'd return to if his surgeon or the Jets doctors are strongly against it, particularly the highly respected surgeon, Dr. Neal. Not pronouncing that last name. But Rodgers also has pangs about how much the Jets bent their organization, team, and locker room to his desires when the Packers traded him to New York. He believes in the ethos of the locker room and knows other players play with pain and sometimes risk further injury by playing. If he can be sure he's reasonably recovered without significant risk of re-tearing the Achilles, I think he'd strongly consider playing whatever the Jets' record is. I think he may feel a personal need to come back to a team that remade itself for him and is struggling incredibly with terrible quarterback play since he was lost the first game of the season. So this report makes it seem like Rodgers is definitely feeling a little bit of that guilt. And it's not any of his fault in terms of, an Achilles injury. Like, it's not something that would have, you can bank on happening or not bank on happening. It's just a freak injury. But I think he is feeling a lot of personal responsibility for the decisions of bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, for the decision of, not that like he decided on it, but very clearly, if you wanted Rodgers here, you had to have Hackett in this sort of situation. So, Hackett coming over here, you sign Lazard, who's looking like dog shit right now. Not really good from a weapon perspective with Dalvin Cook. Billy Turner looks like a turnstile. The whole, let's bring all the ex-Packers in here to make Rodgers comfortable. And then you wind up losing Rodgers immediately and you throw Zach, who's supposed to sit for an entire year, into the fire. I think Rodgers is probably feeling a certain way, like, man, I let a lot of people down. Woody Johnson didn't take out the insurance on Rodgers' contract because he was so certain he was going to be healthy, and now there would have been a $20 million recouping if he had just done that. Rodgers, I think, sees all these sort of negatives and all these repercussions that aren't, they were caused because of the impact that his injury had, and I think he's trying to recoup as much of that as possible. I think there's no surprise, or not that there's no surprise, but I think there's no... I think it makes sense that he's targeting December 24th. One, it's later into the year, obviously, than like the mid-December deadline we were kind of talking about with like the Dolphins potentially, or even earlier than that with maybe the Texans. But I think that allows the Jets to maybe target and potentially upsell a December 24th Christmas Eve game against the Commanders that otherwise wouldn't have been a very popular ticket, at the hopes that you might be able to get to see Aaron Rodgers play in a New York Jet uniform and complete a pass for your Christmas gift. try to recoup a little bit of money that way. I think there's some value there. Now, as far as pros and cons, let's talk about the most jarring things, the cons, because the risk of injury, re-injuring that Achilles, and jeopardizing the 2024 campaign after we just wasted the 2022 and 2023 campaigns on horrible quarterback play. Can you reasonably risk the 2024 campaign with Rodgers coming out and playing behind an offensive line that I don't think any of us are feeling real confident in? Could this accelerate the firings? If Rodgers comes out and he does not look good, or God forbid he gets hurt, does that now backfire and you're not saving Nathaniel Hackett, you're not saving Robert Saleh, you're now costing these guys potentially their jobs because the move didn't work out, and you're giving the opportunity to see a not fully 100% Rodgers behind a not good offensive line with limited weapons at this point in the season. I think there's a lot of potential powder kegness there. And then is it just for the money? I mentioned that last home game of the season. I mentioned some of the TV ratings. Is there going to be a little bit of hype for that Thursday night game? Maybe it's like, oh, we've sold enough tickets for the Sunday game against the Commanders. Oh, but he's not going to make it. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to play this week. Oh, but maybe he'll play on primetime for Thursday Night Football. Then the ratings get all jazzed up, and then something happens. Then you obviously have the Patriot game the final week of the season. If you can have Rodgers for the final Patriot game of the season, then I think I want to win that game. Like, there's a large part of me going into the final game of the season, if like Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian is our starting quarterback and the season is all but lost, like, I don't necessarily want to win the Patriot game because the Patriot fans want to lose that game. And I want them to hurt from a fan base perspective. I want whatever hurts them more than necessarily like ending the streak on our side. But if Rodgers is starting quarterback, I think that's a different type of mentality for me. Now, as far as the pros for this type of move, confidence in health is a big one. If Aaron Rodgers comes out and he at least proves like, wow, okay, he's moving around a lot. Wow, he's actually throwing the rock well. He's able to escape some of this pressure by sliding around the pocket. He looks healthy. I think we're going to attract some offensive linemen in free agency. I think we're going to attract some free agent wide receivers in free agency. I think it gives you a lot more confidence in him as a player moving forward than anything else. Confidence in the staff. If he plays well, then Nathaniel Hackett's job is safer than it would be if he didn't play. Now, I don't think Nathaniel Hackett or Robert Saleh are probably going to get fired. I would be very surprised if Rodgers doesn't play. I think they're still coming back either way, but I think it alleviates some of the heat that's coming on to Saleh and Hackett and Douglas and like everyone that had a hand in deciding what happened with Rodgers for this season. And I think having that confidence in, okay, look, with competent quarterback play, you can rely on this staff, because right now it is very, very hard to have trust in this staff. Assessment of your players is another big key and important part of this. I want to see what Aaron Rodgers looks like with some of these wide receivers, with some of these offensive linemen, with some of the tight ends, the running backs, all these different things. And what does this defense look like with a legitimate quarterback playing? Because if you can assess your young players, if you can assess some of the players that are currently on your team that you got to make decisions about, maybe it's, maybe you're able to retain a Bryce Huff, maybe you're able to retain a Mekhi Becton on a reasonable contract, or maybe you're feeling more confidence in some of these potential decisions that you're going to have to make in the offseason. I think the assessment of your players, or what you might have to spend assets on in the offseason, it may not even necessarily be the players on your current team that you want to keep. It could be, evaluating if you want to bring someone else in. Revenue potential is a huge pro for Aaron Rodgers coming back. Now, is it just for the money because he feels bad, or is it the revenue potential for the team? There's an incentive for Woody Johnson to want to see him out there. So there's a financial incentive for obviously other players for him to be out there. Maybe there's some incentive type goals that would make sense for some of these players to earn back some paycheck that they would have, lost if they had Zach Wilson or Tim Boyle under center. I think there's a lot from a financial side, especially from the NFL side of things with the Monday night or the Thursday night game against the Browns. I think there's value in these final few games beyond what like the fan necessarily sees, because we're not going to see any fan revenue for us. It doesn't make any sense. But from a team perspective, I can see some value there. Now, Robert Saleh did say if Rodgers is cleared, he will be able to play, and they won't hold him back or anything like that. And I think that's probably the right decision to make. It's weird. In the course of the last few weeks, I've gone from I don't want to see Rodgers play because I don't want to sacrifice 2024 to I would like to see Rodgers play because at least it provides a little bit of clarity on the coaching staff, a little bit more clarity on Aaron Rodgers himself. We don't know if he would have even been like a good quarterback pre-injury because there was a lot of concern over the potential decline from last year. Now, I think that's probably more because of his broken thumb on his throwing hand than it is about his decline, but I think at least having that sort of clarity going into the tail end of the season and into the offseason, in an important offseason where maybe you want to decide, hey, we're pulling the plug on Saleh and Hackett regardless. We're going to go, maybe Douglas is out the door too. We're going to make our decision in the top. Maybe you're picking top 7 and you got a quarterback sitting there. Are you taking the offensive lineman? Are you taking the wide receiver? Are you taking the quarterback? There's a lot of decisions that have to be made this offseason, and at least kind of having an idea of what Rodgers is or is not, maybe that makes a decision easier for him if he wants to potentially step away from the game. Maybe it makes it easier for the Jets to decide on, okay, we have to get a young signal caller in here with a higher draft pick than we were initially anticipating on. Or maybe you feel like you have more confidence in him because he's actually playing the position well and you want to build around him for maybe more than just one season. So I think I've fallen a little bit more on the pro side, surprisingly, than the con side, just because of how everything's kind of gone to shit the last little bit here these last few weeks. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about the Aaron Rodgers situation? Do you want to see Aaron Rodgers play again this season? Do you like the pros? Do you dislike the con side of things? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, go Jets.